May the 4th be with you guys. Welcome to our part 2 of our Star Wars Revisited series. Be sure to check out our original trilogy revisit as well, but for this episode we are going back to the prequel trilogy from the Star Wars franchise. Things we liked about it, some things we didn't, what we think it did for the franchise as a whole. So Akram, let's start with your thoughts.
Yeah, there's so much you can pull from the prequel trilogy as well as this, the original with the new canon wise. We got the Clone Wars after the prequels, so that's really cool. And I think for the most part, the prequel sets such a high bar for choreography. It's something that I feel Star Wars lacks now. I wish they bring it back. This was the pinnacle to show the Jedis in their prime. I hope now in future renditions of like stuff when we see the Old Republic and whatnot, I hope we get to see some of that fighting styles come into play. And more of the mythos. Now it's like really deep into the mythology. So I love the prequels.
Yeah, I may be a little bit biased because I always enjoy the prequels, but yeah, if you think about it, the prequels kind of ushered in the modern era of Star Wars now, right? It's like you said, like these movies are much more fast-paced in terms of choreography and storytelling. Like in the original trilogy, one movie might have 3 planets, and these movies you could visit like 6 in one movie, right? I think like Revenge of the Sith had like 12 planets in one movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, the fighting is much more faster, much more, martial arts inspired. And this is the Jedi in their prime, right? And what I loved about this trilogy was it just took that one line that Obi-Wan mentions in A New Hope about the Jedi Knights of the Old Republic, right? What was the Clone Wars back then? Like when you first see that scene, you don't know what they're talking about. Here, it really like fleshes out that whole events that transpired. And yeah, I love, of course, Hayden as Anakin and Ewan McGregor. I think their brotherhood in this series, just watching it from episode 1 to episode 3 was just so heartbreaking, watching, and even now with the Kenobi series, because they were just so close and they were very believable as brothers and mentors and kind of like father-son figures too. But what's the other thoughts you had on this trilogy?
Yeah, cool cast of characters. We got Natalie Portman, Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon, Ian McDermott. He's like, he lives in Star Wars. Good. Yeah, he's just like he's such a phenomenal actor. I forgot to mention that in the original trilogy revisited. He's such a phenomenal actor, especially here. This is like the parts where he shined, playing as Palpatine. My goodness, he was wonderful here. Yeah, so I think the CGI, of course, was spotty, but Revenge of the Sith, I always remember like that opening shot when they're fighting over Coruscant. That was something. I never seen anything like that. The whole prequel trilogy feels so grand and epic, and the designs as well. My goodness. Oh, and the clone troopers, the designs from that, the helmet. Yeah. My favorite helmet design. It's so beautiful. What's really funny is if we were talking like this back in like 2005, people will be making fun of us. They called us a madman. But now it's like it's more acceptable. I think now people are starting to realize that it was actually pretty good. I think some things you have to give it a little bit of time to breathe. Unfortunately, because people are like schizo and they are like fight with people and they try bully people online and whatnot.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is also the trilogy that I think ushered in also the toxicity of Star Wars, where everybody was very divisive. At the time, like you said, like this was a very controversial trilogy. A lot of people, some perhaps like enjoyed it, but I think a lot of people thought it kind of devalued the original trilogy in a way. But I think it was awesome. Like growing up, I didn't find any faults with it. Maybe now because I'm more of an analyst when it comes to watching films, I can nitpick, like you said, like the CGI was spotty, but the first time you watch it, you don't really think about it, right? Like the big battles, whether like the battle droids or the Gungans, right? Or the clone troopers, it's just something that it's very entertaining, but it's still Star Wars in a way, right? It's weird to say it's like a newer, updated version of Star Wars, which is kind of weird to say because it's like this takes place before the original trilogy. It's like these very newer concepts, but I think now as we kind of see all these newer properties and kind of like these prequels and sequels and in between interim franchises, now we kind of see like it's more natural now looking from the original trilogy or the prequels to the original trilogy now, right?
And I think this is the trilogy where you get a lot closer into detail as fans. You get to see the hilt designs. We get to see different techniques of fighting styles, more visual encyclopedias, more products that people can just invest in and delve into this world a little bit more. Back then, for the originals, all people had was really like, I guess, like legends. They call it legends now, like novels and whatnot. And that was really about it. Maybe some video games here and there. But with the prequels, it introduced so much because there was so much. And it's funny, we now, I guess because we were younger around the prequel, so now when we see something like Avatar, it's like, whoa, my goodness, look at it feels so authentic and lived in. But really, the prequels, the originals, but the prequels really started that. Like, there's so much stuff that you could see on a chart, and it's like, oh yeah, this is this, this is this, this is this. So, and we get introduced to Sith finally. That's awesome. Yeah. So we get introduced to, we were introduced...
The first time, actually, that they actually name-dropped Sith.
Yes, and we see Darth Maul, Ray Park. That's awesome. First time we see a dual lightsaber. That was iconic. The music felt very... because here it was like so grand. And in the originals, it was very... It did feel like kind of 1970-ish. It was something a lot... It was almost... It's kind of weird to say, but kind of like... family friendly. I don't know. It's not like you compare John Williams to like Kanye in the last one, so it's not like he's cussing here and there. But like the music is just more kind of aggressive and more like
it's more epic.
Yeah, and you feel it. Something about it. You feel it. So yeah.
Yeah, and just everything was just so grand scale. And I also like that we saw like what the Jedi Council was for the first time. Seeing Yoda in his prime, that was a big, step. Like, because we only got like a puppet in the original trilogy. Now we see Yoda. They did kind of revise the CGI a little bit over the years, but man, Yoda like with a lightsaber, like who would have thought of that?
Oh yeah.
The villains in the original trilogy were like some of the best in any Star Wars friend. We got, of course, Darth Maul, Count Dooku, General Grievous, Jango Fett. Yeah. Man, there were so many, great, unique, and some of them were throwaways, but for the most part, and even Palpatine himself as the Emperor, right? Like you said, like Ian McDermott really shined in this trilogy as far as acting chops, right?
He played that role deliciously, just a smile on his face. He was like having fun.
The devil.
Perfect. And they have a lot of classical actors, which is really, that's to show you that it's more, it's like an epic. It's something, if you want to do an epic medieval movie, you would get someone like Ian McDermott. I forgot the actor from Count Dooku. I'm like blanking right now. Christopher Lee. You'll get these type of actors, Alec Guinness, back in the day. It's something that you have to have these people. I can't see them in any other role. They're like born for these roles, and it's honestly wonderful. And we get introduced to the clones, so that's a big thing. That's a big thing that will be in Star Wars, I'd say forever, because a lot of people are pulling from that. We see the Mandalorian, they're kind of pulling from that as well. And we see different aliens, but people have problems, and I think the sequels tried to rectify it. It was the overuse of CGI, especially at the time where, they mostly filmed in front of green screen and blue screen and whatnot. But I rather touch on the choreography a little bit more, because I hope at least they try to reproduce this type of beautiful choreography in the later films, because it's more than just a fight. It's more than just a dance. It's like a poem in a way. It adds storytelling too through the action itself. So let me get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the choreography was amazing. You really felt like these were Jedi, right? Like watching the original trilogy now, I think that's one fault I did have with the prequels, it was too good
Yeah.
in a way, if that's a flaw. Because you had the Luke and the Vader fight, and you had the Obi-Wan and the Vader fight, but they were just kind of like, they were just more fencer like. Here it's more like kendo, or forget the Hema, like the sword fighting, like with the broadswords, and it's very. I think everybody. This is the trilogy where like everybody thought they were a Jedi when they had like a stick, and they thought they could just like do some Anakin and Obi-Wan spins, right? But there's a nuance to it, and I love how they fight, and you could tell like they went through hours of training just to get this choreography down pat. And of course, episode 1, Phantom Menace, that's really where it started. And of course, with the Duel of Fate soundtrack, it just blended in really nicely. It just felt like these very epic duels, right? And it just progressed, over the course of the films. And of course, the Anakin and Obi-Wan fight is my favorite fight, and I think a lot of people would say that as well. It's one of the best fights in all of Star Wars.
Oh yeah, and again, it means so much. There was such a build up you had since 1977, so you knew it was going to come to a head, and this was it. And I think the way how they did that whole Mustafar setting, first and foremost, like that was awesome. But then also just the build up, Natalie Portman's performance too in Revenge of the Sith. Actually, believe it or not, Revenge of the Sith is one of my favorite Star Wars movies, and it's so dark and so tragic. But it led the stage again for the original trilogy. Now we got like an awareness of where New Hope, how it led up to New Hope. I'm like lacking my English skills today, sorry guys, but yeah. So what else thoughts do you have?
Well, I was gonna say that I think one of the weaker parts of the prequel trilogy was actually the Anakin and Padme relationship.
Oh really?
Because it's really hard for me to watch, especially Attack of Clones. That's why like I still love Attack of Clones, but it's like one of the ones that I could put off. Just because I feel like some of the scenes with Anakin and Padme just felt like really awkward or like really hard to watch on screen. Like he literally confesses that he murdered a whole Tusken Raider clan, and she's just like, oh yeah, whatever.
Based,
like,
red
good
pill.
riddance. Yeah. They were animals, and I slaughtered them like animals.
Good. Yeah, that was pretty kind of cringe sometimes. I think. Well, also like her look is so iconic too, like the dresses and stuff like that for Padme is so beautiful. But that's just a side note. But yeah, I mean their relationship. Like again, when you have older movies in Star Wars, it means something else because there's so much that happened in the past and
right
now in the future and everything's built up. So now it's like you look at it through a different lens, and especially the Clone Wars animated show. It's I guess in that show they actually had a better relationship if you think about it. In the Clone Wars.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I mean, I could kind of overlook it, but I mean, right from the beginning, it was kind of weird because there was already like an age gap between Anakin and Padme.
Yeah.
And then coming into it in episode 2, I was like, oh, fucking Anakin just grew up in like 2 years or some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Based.
She was a 10, dude. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, and then like I was like, I always wondered like how did no one notice she was like pregnant like over a whole war, right? But they kind of like you said, they kind of explained that over the course of like the Clone Wars, and that's what thing I did like about the prequels. It had so many great spin-offs like the Clone Wars 3D animated series from Dave Filoni, also the Clone Wars micro series from Gennady Tartakovsky. I always thought that was a really cool micro series. Battlefront 2 game, even Jedi Fallen Survivor, pulls from the prequels a bit.
Yeah.
Just because it's like you said, it set such a high bar of what Star Wars should be and could be, right? And that's why I don't mind the CGI as much, because I think the original trilogy did a good job of introducing us to this world, but I think the prequels really expanded upon it. And
Sure.
I think you couldn't do that without CGI, right? There's only so much you could do with practical effects, right? If you want like these big grandiose battles, right, you're going to have to implement CGI, especially with like the clone troopers, right? You have to make it, I mean, it wasn't bad actually. Like looking now, they probably remastered it so much that like I don't even notice it now. So yeah, I didn't mind the CGI so much in the prequel trilogy. And yeah, it just, everything came together really nice. Like you said, like the music was just so epic. I think they just took the music from the original trilogy and then brought it up to a 10 or 11. It worked so well. And just seeing like the different array of characters, even like some of the other Jedi, right, as we see over the course of the prequels, like Ki-Adi-Mundi or Aayla Secura, like we kind of like get more interested in like the Jedi like hierarchy and the order, right? There's just it adds so much to the lore.
Yeah, and it's very political too. It does feel like a type of like a political thriller, mixed with war and different elements. I think there is an obstacle when you're trying to build from this older series that a lot of the setting is very worn down and utilitarian. If you think about it, a lot of the settings from the original trilogy weren't like very beautiful. If you really think about it, when you see Naboo and it's completely fictionalized, they're not filming in Wadi Rum or something like that in Jordan. When you see Mustafar, when you see all these things, it does feel very Tolkien-esque. Some of the settings, I think that's where when it feels more like this old tale. For some reason, we all know that tale. The setting, we're like, not because we watched the movies before, but it's something that we've read. Yeah, and we read in stories. So I think they nailed it completely with that. Oh, the ship designs were very different as well. Oh. Awesome. Yeah, they're still like pulling from the prequel ships.
Anakin's ship from Revenge of the Sith is still my favorite starship in the whole Star Wars.
Yeah, and it's so cool how they also keep in mind about the original. So they keep like some iteration designs. I like how they make a lot of the designs like that design is the progenitor of this later on. It's like they have to kind of back engineer some things. Yeah, it's weird too because I'd say the art design for the prequels is very artisanal, very eloquent, more so than the originals. And it's kind of funny how they have to back engineer that. Let's keep that in mind. Right. And they have to make it work so it makes sense. It's like cohesive for the original.
Right. Well, when you're looking at it, it's like you said, it's more political. There's kind of a nuance to the prequel trilogy. Right, because you have like Coruscant, it's like the planet where we have like all these representatives from the galaxy. You have the different alien species. You're not dealing with the aliens from like the Cantina Bar in Tatooine. You have like the Kaminoans. They're like very like sleek looking. Even the Geonosians, they kind of have this cool like insectoid kind of vibe to them. And yeah, it was interesting actually going back to Tatooine a couple times in the prequel trilogy because it kind of felt different too. It wasn't the Tatooine that we yet knew in original trilogy. It was familiar, but it was still different. This was, I always say, it was Anakin's Tatooine, right? It just felt like it was still like a place of scum and villainy, but it was something you could have more fun with, right? We had the pod racing thing. I always thought that was like a cool implementation that Star Wars did, was the pod racing.
Yeah. And it was a cool like tease of showing Anakin's pilot skills, and then we also see that in Darth Vader. So I like how they kind of build his character. I mean, the age gap thing was weird, but whatever. And then again, the cast of characters is awesome. Ewan McGregor nails it as Obi-Wan. Everyone just does such a good job. I always think of the original trilogy as like war type of movies, and then the prequel I always think about it as like this political thriller / love story, and then the sequels I always think about it as pseudo war, but also like a heist type of films. So it's like really interesting how they kind of try to change up, the trajectory of the genre a little bit. Yeah. Oh, and motherfucking Mace Windu. Got a shout
Samuel
out.
Jackson.
Yeah, have him there. First purple lightsaber. That's also like they introduced so much. And plus they weren't limited by their technology. I kind of feel like Matthew McConaughey Interstellar, they're not confined to this plane or something like that. Right. It's like they could do so much. They have open sandbox here.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to ask you what you kind of thought of Anakin's story, right? Because it is very parallel to Luke, right?
Yeah.
But in a weird way, it's like a loop. It's like Luke kind of parallels Anakin in a way. So I want to get your thoughts on like Hayden's performance and what you thought of Anakin's journey in the prequel trilogy.
So it's weird to comment on this because I have so much knowledge from the comics and Obi-Wan series. So when I think about his journey on the show, it's kind of like now my lens is colored. But Hayden Christensen's performance in the 3 movies, I don't think he was annoying. I genuinely enjoyed his performance and his character arc. He was like in 2 movies, right? Because he wasn't in Phantom Menace, so really we had to deal with him in 2 movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was okay. Like, a lot of people saying he's this bratty kid in Attack of the Clones, and in Revenge of the Sith was like kind of like a glow up. You know, maybe he saw some Andrew Tate videos. He became really red pill, you know. But he was. I think they did his character well, and it's a heavy burden he has to take on to play this character that eventually will be Darth Vader. So, but it's not his fault. It's the writing, right? It's the writing that made him this way. But for everyone else, I think they could suck my dick, because I actually love Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker in the prequel. I think they handle him well. So I don't know. I don't get, unless those guys back then, those nerds back then, like in the early 2000s, were, I don't know, not getting pussy like Hayden Christensen was.
Motherfuckers in their basement or some shit.
Yeah, because he was like, that was over toxic for no reason. He really was good. I really loved his performance as Anakin. I have to say that I really do. And I like how they handled him. It's weird. He's like kind of weird, right? But that's a good thing, because he's someone that Sheev can really sink his teeth into and turn him. And I think that was important. I think people kind of missed the setup. I don't know if there was like deleted scenes, but I know there was deleted scenes, but I don't know if there was this different approach, like how they were going to turn Anakin to the dark side. I don't know. Perhaps that could have been a problem back then. But for the most part, looking back, especially now that we have canon, now that we have comics and stuff, and then plus we have Obi-Wan and seeing Hayden back, I think everything makes a lot more sense. That could be a bad thing and that could be a good thing, because the bad thing is that, well, you need to rely on, it's like you were talking about CGI, like, oh, you have to rely on the remakes to make it better. So that can be like something that's bad.
Detriment.
Yeah, detriment. Yeah. But it does seem like a crutch, but I think it works out for the bigger picture. Yeah, that was a long-winded answer. Sure. Sorry, but yeah, you tell me now.
Great points. Yeah, and I think you have to keep in mind also. I think Hayden Christensen didn't have that much as far as like acting roles back then. Maybe he did. I don't know, because I didn't really see much of him until after Star Wars. So coming into this role, he was kind of like a new face, right? He was kind of like the new Luke, right? He was like a more younger, more athletic kind of Jedi. And yeah, I think over the course of the, like, not even thinking about the spin-offs aside, I think just from when I was younger watching it, I think it kind of made sense, and just seeing like his loss over the 3 movies. You know, he lost his mother, right? He lost, well, he didn't have the respect that he wanted to, and then he feared for his, you know, wife and child, of course. So it's, you know, people always complained back then like these weren't like valid reasons for him to kind of betray the Jedi, but now I'm thinking about it, it's like it's very human reaction, right? It's like you have so much loss, and all you want to do, right, is find a way to protect the people that you love, right? Even if that means betraying everything that you stood for, right? So I loved Anakin's journey, right? And I love, like I said, Hayden and Ewan's relationship in these 3 movies. I think they were just so believable, and they had like such a witty like back and forth with their banter. I always love like their kind of like quips were like, sorry, master, I'll try, master.
Yeah. Great chemistry.
Right. I think now it's actually weird watch. I think we were talking a little bit about this earlier. With all the spin-offs now, and especially with the inclusion of Ahsoka in canon, it's weird to rewatch the prequels now.
It is, yeah.
It's an entirely different movie in if you add that context into it, right? Because I always wondered like why they made Anakin a master in the Clone Wars, right, when he really wasn't supposed to be. But now I'm thinking about it, and it's like, now that I think about the loss of Ahsoka as well, it kind of adds more to Anakin's frustration, right? Because now it's like well, now he lost everything, right? He lost his Padawan, his mother, and now he's afraid for his wife and child as well. So it builds off of that, right?
You're right. And what's interesting too is that these new iterations and these new ideas and add-ons, they feel very isolated in a sense, because you have the prequels, you can't do nothing about that. You have the Clone Wars and what goes on in there, so animated, and then plus you have Rebels. So it does feel very isolated, these narrative threads. But now what's interesting is we're seeing the isolation barrier melt, and now it's translating to live action. And I wonder how that will now affect our lenses at looking at the prequels, because we have the Ahsoka series. Who knows if maybe Hayden will make like Force Ghost or something like that, like something, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And also the prequels so much affect the sequels. I think the original kind of affects more the sequels, but the prequels had a lot to do with it as well, because they go kind of deep state with the mythos from Star Wars, even more so, especially like Exegol and stuff like that. I love the prequels. I think a lot more people love the prequels now. I mean, everyone's excited for Obi-Wan Kenobi, you know. I think now a lot more people are open-minded to the prequels, and Jar Jar is one of the best characters, and Newt Gunray. I was hoping you say your thing.
Victory. Oh, close. Yeah. Well, also, yeah, we didn't even talk about the many memes that it launched, right?
Yeah,
I think the prequel is just so memeable.
Yeah. So when we were in high school together, we used to like write some quotes on our, I think French teacher or English teacher. Yeah, French teacher's like attendance sheet. We used to like say stuff. We used to write like new Gunray quotes and whatnot. It was good times. We were, you know.
Right. There was actually, I think we were in a history class, and you were asked to read this poem or something, and the actual line was, "The war is over."
The war is over. The war is over. Wait, that's the cool thing about the prequels. It brought a new generation of Star Wars fans like us together, and we had something in common, and we had it because the prequels was, I'd say, good, but it was very memeable as well. So there were like a lot of things we could pull from and just laugh about, you know. And I think that's a very important thing to do, especially in these times where everything's so hard. It's like to come together over something. And that's what Star Wars is about at the end of the day. That's why we see like big battles and everyone celebrates and they're coming together. So in a way, it means more than just a movie.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think it's kind of reached cult status now, right? Like, back then, perhaps it was controversial, but I think now there's much more of an appreciation for it, with or without the sequels. You know, you could say whatever you want about the sequels, but I think people just kind of grew to love the prequels on their own over time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just one of those things that, you know, it was a perfect prequel in a way, right? There's not many movies where like you can really have a setup for something and it kind of makes sense, right? I think the prequels did their own thing, and it felt like Star Wars, but it wasn't the original trilogy just retold, right?
Yeah.
It was its own thing, and it built so many new ideas, and it crafted all these legendary characters that we love, and, you know, it just added so much to the lore, as I said already. But yeah, it's one of those things that I always love rewatching as a kid.
Yeah. What now? The deep question here, the hard question, tricky one, is which one was your favorite movie from the prequel trilogy?
Oh, Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah,
come
me
on,
too.
Look at my fucking shirt. Like, come on.
Me too.
You think I'm really not gonna answer that question? Come on. Although, I mean, you know, if I had to look at each one, right? Like Phantom Menace, iconic in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, soundtrack was legendary. Darth Maul, you know, I think is a great character. Qui-Gon, you know, he had Liam Neeson, was like one of the most iconic Jedi ever. Attack of the Clones was probably on the weaker end of the spectrum. I think it's more forgettable, but still had cool elements. I mean, the whole arena scene and seeing all the Jedi come, and of course, you know, the Dooku and Yoda fight, I think is iconic. But Revenge of the Sith, man, that's the heart of the trilogy right there.
Yeah, hands down, a great movie, great choreography, heartbreaking, huger than I think the previous two in a sense, and it leads up directly to A New Hope. It's a very important movie, one of my first Star Wars movies that I've ever seen, and one that we keep quoting and memeing.
Right. And it's one of the few movies where the bad guys actually win.
Exactly.
I always thought that was interesting.
That is very interesting, and forever will be iconic. But everybody, that is our Revisited for the prequel trilogy. Guys, we're not finished. We are going to do the sequel trilogy next up.
Are you sure we have to?
Well, we might as well, just to be fair. I mean, it's going to be pretty controversial, but guys, if you made it to
bad feeling about this.
Well, we didn't even mention Lando, but yeah, Lando shows up, so yeah. But guys, listen, please make sure to leave a like if you actually like this video and check out our other playlists. We do plenty of reviews. Again, we keep saying this. There's a lot of newcomers coming around, so thank you so much for all the new subs. We love you. We appreciate you. Welcome to the Lunch Table family. Dylan, take us away.
Yeah, thank you guys for sticking around. Happy Star Wars Day to all the fans out there. Hope you're celebrating, having a good time. Yeah, we also have Star Wars Visions coming up, so we'll do a review for that. And for all the parents and kids, we're going to be doing Young Jedi's, a review for that as well, so that'll be interesting. So plenty of Star Wars content for today. But yeah, thank you guys so much, and until then, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you. See you guys. The war is over.
Victory.